And welcome to video number 12 here. Just continuing on with the people. It's just kind of just throwing a mass of color down. It could all be the same color per person, or you could mix things up a little bit. Maybe you want to go with like some blue jean colors. But I tend to just throw in a little bit of brightness too. Just to mix it up a little bit. You're not going to have a lot of people generally in your painting, so this is just an opportunity to kind of create a little burst of color somewhere. I'm going to let those sit for a little bit before I add more. But coming back over here, you can see that this is drying nicely. I'm getting a good mixture of color and in with the greens, and some sort of suggestion of the bougainvillea or the roses coming off the page. This is drying nicely. We're getting some good blooms in here, and you can see that if you leave some parts of the painting a little bit wetter longer, it tends to stain too, and that's a good technique as well. So we get this kind of the color setting into the pits, the more sedimentary colors. So the next thing to do is the tree trunks and the bark and whatnot. And I usually do this at the end as well. And I basically throw a little bit of brown down on the bark. Be careful not to touch any of your other parts of your paint that are still wet. Throw down some bark. Choose whatever brown color you want, burnt umber or raw sienna. And then while that's still wet, I'll do the same thing over here. These can be a little bit darker because they're kind of underneath the trees. Same thing here. But while this is still wet, I'm going to, in this case I put too much down, so I'm going to pull up the excess. I'll come in and add a little bit of shadow. So let's say the light is coming from the left. I'll put some shadow on the right, just to kind of give you a sense of where the light is coming from. And that's all you do for the tree trunks. Just let the brown sort of take over and give it a little bit of shadow behind. If you overdid it like me, just take your paper towel and pull up the excess, which gives me the opportunity to throw in a little bit more of this burnt umber color down here. Voila. Okay, so then once those people dry, I'll add a little bit more. And so that's the technique of foliage. Next, I'm going to show you as we do it on here, on the actual sketch of the day. So we've done the sky, and you can enter the next phase while it's still wet, as long as this part isn't touching what you're going to do next, which is going to be this foreground lawn area. Or you can just wait for it to dry. In this case, it's dry now, so we're good to go. But for the lawn area, I just take my middle green, but first I take my dirty water and I just paint everything kind of like I did sky. I do everything in a very light, dirty watercolor. Everywhere that I want to have this sort of lawn area. It could be a field of dry grass, it could be a lawn, it could be, the hills. Whatever you've got going on in the foreground, you're going to kind of paint it just like you did the sky, with mostly just just water to kind of get the base coat down. And then while that is still wet, that's when I'm going to come in with my middle green and let that bleed into the rest of it. So I don't want this to be too dark because I don't want it to compete with the foliage in the background that I'm going to be doing. So this is getting borderline too dark, so I'm probably going to hit it with my paper towel just to take off a little bit of the edge of it. Lighten that up a little bit. See how I get a slightly lower value by just hitting it with my paper towel. And then I'm just letting that kind of bleed into the rest of the foreground with this water that was already on. So it's wet on wet technique again. Voila. So then we have to let that dry a little bit before we can come in and do the rest of the foliage, because now this is wet and we don't want this to bleed. But here's a kind of an example of what that sort of foreground might look like. All right, when I see you again, I'm going to paint these last few parts, and then we'll call it a day.